hundreds of millions, billions of people around the world that have those beliefs, but they're still thoughts. That's where they exist. They're thoughts and beliefs that have a history, but they're still it's like it's still part of the realm of things that are made up by humans.
Mm.
And I don't know how much more to say about that part. The only other
The
thing that I'll
story.
mention.
We often talk about the story, don't we?
Oh, right.
That
Yep.
this is a story. It's interesting because the story, you can get the truth about the story depending on where you go, right? So if we're talking about what's happening in Minneapolis at the moment, I could go to CNN and I could get the story, and then I could switch over to Fox News and I could get the same series and I could get the same series of events, but I'm being told a different story. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that
Yep.
interesting that I can get different stories just at the flick of a switch? And in a way, that's what's happening in life, that we have these stories and we believe the story depending on our conditioning and what influences we've been exposed to. All of that determines which story we're going to believe.
Yep.
Mm.
So maybe you shouldn't believe anything as a conclusion. But of
Well,
course, you
you're
have
I
to
kind
think
believe something in terms of functioning. There is this functioning of life. So you have to believe something. Um, and there's two kinds of beliefs. There's the kind of belief that is, if I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, I believe that if I take a step forward, I'm going to fall into the abyss, and that's not going to be very good. Or, I can believe that if I don't feed myself, I'm going to starve to death or whatever. But then there's other kind of belief that where there are these very, very highly nuanced belief based on values and what you've been brought up to believe and all of those things. And they're much more kind of difficult to pin down, and they can change so easily depending on what you're exposed to. You can have a belief one week and then you encounter something that can completely change that belief. This is the illusion. Uh,
yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to articulate how what has come clearer clearer to me in recent weeks. And I guess the only other thing is that I guess I would call it responding, choosing to respond to what is present right now, not the story of how we got to this place, whether this is in the big scheme, whether this is what's going on in Minneapolis, whether it's what's going on in my life. Like, I'll paint a tiny analogy for a moment. If and this hasn't happened for a while, but let's say that my daughter drops a glass and it breaks on the floor. Instead of responding with any sort of like annoyance or anger or blame or why would you do this, and then being upset with her for having done that, um, it's, well, okay, now there's broken glass on the floor and there's water on the floor and it needs to be picked up. So like shed the story of how things got to what is actually real or present in the moment, and respond to that. And so things like um, helping people. If there's someone right now who is in need of some help, who is hungry, I've been doing some meal deliveries or grocery deliveries. Um, it's almost like helping to if I have the capacity, and if I guess that's mostly it. If I have the ability and the capacity to help somebody who is in need, then help. Like that, in a sense, on an individual scale, a few years ago when I had the realization that so much of my suffering was all thoughts and expectations of what I wanted to have happen and what wasn't actually happening, and just um, paying closer attention to what my experience is in the moment and responding to that. It's kind of brought it into the things that I'm seeing around me. Don't think about what I wish were true. Don't think about what I want to eventually be true. Um, don't try to resist it. Acknowledge what is happening right now, accept it, and if there's somebody in need and I'm capable, then maybe I'll reach out and lend a hand.
Good
And
stuff.
that's what I can do.
Something you said earlier that got my attention was that you feel, don't let me put words in your mouth, but the way I interpreted it, you feel a bit remiss that you don't identify as a citizen of the world as much as you identify as a citizen of America. What you were saying a bit earlier, that so, and how you come to realize that was because you don't have the same emotional response to news items about people suffering as you do when you see it firsthand. And so that was an interesting one. And I kind of, what really piqued my attention was that the idea that you see it as an improvement to identify as a citizen of the world over identifying as a citizen of America. Kind of, like it's a bit rough, the way I'm saying it, but yeah. And what part of it that got my attention was that what we want to do eventually is move to where we don't identify as anything, which kind of, I hasten to say, to add, is a case of identifying as everything and everybody and everywhere. So not, but right, but so to move your identification out into a more open area as identify, it's still identifying, it's still it's still coming from a place that is created, that is invented.
I'm glad you said that, because I, gosh, if I'm being honest with myself, I think a lot of the dissolving of identification or relief from identification in recent years has not been simply shedding it. There's been a real uh, part of what happened is, as the thing that I didn't realize I was identifying with started to break up, it wasn't simply that identification was dissolving. It was that by shifting my identification to something else, I was able to see the identification happening over here.
Mm.
And that um, That's still happening.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And no doubt that the, a dissolving happens to some extent with that because you can't see it and kind of keep believing it. The two don't go together. Yet there's a now this is on a different subject almost, but yet to feel good about the country you live in, if there are well a whole lot of potential conditions can come from that. That doesn't make you a nationalist or whatever. It doesn't make you a racist because it doesn't include a sense of superiority. It might be more factual about. I mean, you and I, no doubt, would agree that we're both privileged when it comes to a large proportion of the world who doesn't have what we have, don't have a house to live in, don't have a food on their table all the time, don't have a bank account, etc. So, that we can be grateful for that, even though we've never known it to be any different.
Gosh, there are
Is
two
that,
things that the, when you said the word superiority, there there are times when my thoughts go down the path of like, wait, are you sure that you actually don't feel superior to others? Um, and so then I started to just kind of think about sort of my beliefs and values compared to, someone who um, is a diehard Trump supporter. Um, and there is a degree where I feel like my values are my beliefs about how you treat other people are superior to theirs. Um, in terms of, I guess I'll just pause there. So I think there is a bit of truth to there, a, a a bit of truth to a feeling of superiority. And what that made me think of was, I mentioned before how I've come to see my thoughts and um, reactions to situations over recent years being a lot like AI, where um, there's conditioning and there's thoughts that arise that are can only be made up of the inputs that it received.
yeah,
And
yeah,
in the case of AI, like if you had two different um, uh,
knowledge basis.
yeah, let's just say that we've got ChatGPT and we've got, what is the Twitter one? I don't, Grok.
talking to
Uh,
each other.
and well, not talking to each other, but they are trained on different data. Uh, there's the training of all the inputs that you give it, but then there's also just like the capabilities of the thing to be trained and act on that act on that training. Um, if I were to separate my belief in what is there as like biological brain function from all of the conditioning that my brain has received throughout my lifetime, it's weird for me to say that my beliefs are superior because I've been trained better. Like, what? That kind of seems absurd. Like, that's the only reason I have the beliefs and thoughts that I do is because of my conditioning.
It's
So
just
why
biased,
do I?
isn't it? Even
What's that?
AI, even AI is biased. I mean, there are biases there. But
Right.
if I can just quickly return, just without dwelling on it too much, I think what we just learned was a fascinating lesson in the nature of belief. Because even though there were six different camera angles of those unfortunate
Mm.
people, even though there were six different camera angles, and I mean, I personally didn't see either of those people as being threats. That's my view. But I was fascinated to listen to the people who were posing them as a threat, which I found unbelievable. I mean, I just found it unbelievable. But it does show you how belief is such a movable thing that depending on your beliefs and prejudices, you can even deny what your own eyes are telling you. I mean, that's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? I mean, okay, there could be some doubt in the first case with what was her name, Renee Good, but in the second case, I mean, I mean, how could anyone look at that and see that as a threat? It's unbelievable. Yet there were people who were prepared to do that because of their conditioning and beliefs. They were prepared to look at something and even tell themselves that what their own eyes were seeing was not what they were really seeing. I mean, absolutely fascinating. I mean, these two unfortunate people who lost their lives, but nevertheless, a fascinating lesson on the nature of how belief is so malleable, how it's so, it could be fashioned into so many different things depending on all of this conditioning that's in your
Mm.
life.
I would even go a bit further, and again, I'm only just making this up. I don't know how true it is, but I would go as far as to say that those people that the administration, the people that were posing them as threats, right? I don't think they were outright lying. I think they actually believed what they were saying, uh, and that their what their eyes were telling them was only part of
Mm,
the
mm.
story. What they were really paying a lot of attention to was what they imagined the motives were, and that
I think that's a
actually
very
changed
valid
what they saw.
I think that's a very valid point, Vince,
Uh,
because in the moment when one has to react, there's no real thinking involved. There's just a reaction. You can't go there. You can only look at the event afterwards. So yeah, I mean that is a
yeah,
very good point.
it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, not just the motivation, but like what this means. Like the meaning of, oh, this is a an instance of a belief that I've had about the threat to America. And this is what I knew was, I'm not saying me, but like someone who has that perspective and that experience and those beliefs. It's like, oh, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. These are the threats, and we need to resist them, because if we don't, then the continuing eroding of America is going to happen, and we're going to fail. Like, this is having those strong beliefs about um, immigrants and what it's doing to our country, and that we need to do everything we can to stop it, including stopping the people who are trying to resist us stopping it. And
Hmm.
And can you see it as it's happening? I was having a conversation this afternoon with an Australian about how, in some ways, things had become very authoritarian in Australia in politics. But I was saying, well, how do people not see this coming? But it's a little bit like, the thing about boiling a frog in, when you start with cold water, the frog doesn't notice. That these things are gradually and they're just incrementally, just changing. That you don't notice. You don't notice. And that's the thing. You're never in that position where you can just be totally objective and say, oh, well, there's a change in society or this is happening. You can't encapsulate it because it's just very, very slow incremental changes.
yeah. And just this is a great analogy for thinking. So it's so easy to get lost in the content of thought, just as it's so easy to get lost in the content of what we see these actions are. But if we look behind them, if we look at where they come from, what we've got is two seemingly opposing views, but both sides think they're doing the right thing. Both sides want good for the country. They just think that it will be achieved in a radically different way than the others, right? And when you look at the people on the side the side that I don't feel aligned with, uh, it's easy for me to see that they got there because they were hurting. They were hurting for a whole lot of different ways, but they were hurting, and that's how they ended up in that situation. And that's like the fact of the thought rather than the content of the thought. And that's
There was
not
something you
being,
mentioned.
yeah, go on.
There was something you mentioned earlier, Vince, that made me think of how I've been I've been more mindful of the needs behind others' actions. Maybe I mentioned this in recent weeks, but like just I do have a belief that everything we all do is an attempt to meet some sort of need. We all share
Absolutely.
the same needs. We just have different strategies for meeting them, and that's where the conflict comes in. We're both hungry. We're both, I mean, I'm not saying there's only the needs for like shelter and water and food,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get
clothing,
it. I
but
get it.
like there are needs that um, even like the people who are participating or members of ICE, they
Mm,
have needs that they are trying to meet, and this is how they think those
yep.
needs will be met, how they can help meet those needs. And that's something that I can connect with and
Mm,
empathize with
yep.
as much as I disagree with how they're doing it. It's like it's almost made me so curious. It's like, wow, in what ways are they hurting so much? In what ways are their like some core fundamental needs, or in what ways are those not being met to a degree that would contribute to them reacting like this,
Mm,
Well, it's a
signing up to
job.
join ICE? Go ahead.
It's a job. They get paid. They have families. They have to put food on the table, just like everyone else.
yeah, it's an interesting one. Hi, Maria.
Hi. Hi, Vince. Good morning or
Uh,
good evening.
Hello.
so I was having a little fantasy here that you came in and you were hearing us talking about politics, but we weren't actually talking about politics. Do you?
No.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us what's alive for you? What brought you here tonight?
Community. Yeah.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the conversation because I mean it all comes back to the same thing, really. And I'm in a space where I've gotten much quieter because there is so much machination with the mind, constantly evaluating, judging, um, warning, all the things. And it's not believable most of the time
Yeah,
when you really look and see. It's just not. it's interesting. It's interesting to not not so much participate as I've done in the past with the thought streams that arise and the contractions in the body and the coming and going of feelings of expansiveness. Um, yeah, it's just really interesting to me, and so I appreciated the perspective that you all were examining around this, and how we try to sometimes make sense of a situation or what we see, and most of the time it just depends on where your zoom lens is focusing. Is it focusing in the wide? Is it focusing in the narrow? And all the things that you talked about as far as conditioning, I'm fully on board with that. And so I'm not in a pause. I'm just more in a witnessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would it be accurate for me to, well, what I imagine is that you've moved from seeking
Yeah.
into discovering.
Yeah, yeah,
Seeking
that's a
it
good way to
doesn't
put it. Sure.
drive you anymore.
Not really, no.
Hmm.
It just
Excellent.
kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah. And disconcerting at times, but feels,
Yeah.
I don't know, just that silence, that just presence of being. And so that's where the community comes in.
Yes, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There was something you said, Maria, that made me think of one of the things that I have an appreciation for about my experience of the last month is um, I've heard the saying, like in organizations or work, that like when when there is pressure, it exposes weaknesses in a team's processes or abilities. Like you can think that everything's going well, but then when um, challenges or pressure are put on the work, he's like, oh, okay, we've got this gap in how we respond to situations, or we're not as skilled in this area as we thought we were because we really weren't put to the test as much before. Um, my experiences of the last month have put pressure on where I thought my identification and other ways of being and experiencing where I thought they were. And so it's helped to shine a light on, oh, this there's in this, I feel like you mention this all the time. It's just like this is a never ending process, and you're always going to find stuff to work with. Um, this has this has shown some cracks in the dam, and I've got
Yeah. Great.
plenty of stuff to investigate.
Uh,
Yeah, and I find more and more that it's all okay. I mean, no matter what shows up, you know what I mean? It's just, oh, well, isn't that interesting? And oh, this is uncomfortable or not, you know? And
yeah, like that.
yeah, yeah,
Opportunities. Yeah.
yeah,
If you stay with that presence, if you stay with that beingness, then the stuff that you're always working on, that you just mentioned, Jeremy, is less likely to arise when you're staying with that presence. Don't you think there's a correlation there?
Sometimes it's more likely to arise, you
Hmm.
know. I think oftentimes, um, if there's so much focus on the thought stream and what you have to do and, all of that story, you're not paying attention fully to everything. And so when you let go of that aspect and just remain more with whatever arises, I don't know how it works, but the body seems to respond like, oh, okay, you know, let's let this bubble up or let this release. Or, it's like the difference between constantly running a race and your muscles are always tight and stopping, and your body has a chance to relax and process what needs to, whatever, I don't know. Yeah. So I've experienced ebbs and flows of intensity and quiet, you know. Um,
Do you find
that's why
yourself
I
being
say,
able,
sorry, go ahead.
when you have the intensity, do you find yourself being much more content with it than before?
It's like a mix of both because their presence is always, that beingness, for lack of a better word, never goes away. Just it is this, and so I think sometimes when a resistance can arise, even with complete allowing, if that makes sense, it can all be there. It is all there. And I think that can be a turning point to let that be there without identifying with it, even if there's physical arisings that go with it, thoughts that go with it, emotions that come with it. Um, Tears, anger, whatever. Yeah. And none of it lasts, It's like a ever changing landscape. Um, I find it a little trickier if I'm at work, you know, or other such situations. Um, but I've learned there's no point of arrival, so to speak, where everything's fixed and everything's, you know, it's all perfectly imperfect in terms of how we want to label things. I should be this way. I should always be calm. I should never, you know, lose my temper. I should never be reactive. We're human beings. That's just part and parcel of the show. So, yeah. And even when I hear terms like allowing, I guess it's true. It, I guess that's true. But it can look different than
Mm.
that. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense. Um,
It does to me, yeah.
okay. Yeah.
As soon
So,
as we examine any of those words, it gets kind of the
yeah.
closer we get, the more detail we get into, the murkier it gets. Yeah. And I'm just having this little movie playing in my head about resistance or if I get angry, which I do, like I get frustrated or I get emotions get stirred. If I look back on that, what seems to be in common between all of the different experiences of that is that I'm in a place where I think I know something. I
Yeah.
know what's going
Mm,
on. Yeah.
yeah.
And when as soon as you look at it, you realize, well, how can I know? I've just got an interpretation, and that's going to change from moment to moment. So there's nothing
Mhm.
to know. And as soon as you
Yeah.
let go of that, everything kind of, the water's still,
Yes.
get calm
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
I
I
was
think what I
thinking
was
that,
trying to
thinking
say
about that when you
is,
guys were describing, well, maybe this is happening and maybe this is the, impetus behind that. And that's, again, that's all just story and, and that can be let go of. Yeah.
I think the point I wanted to make is that when there's some real stillness there, that stillness is no longer a doing. It's self-sustaining. If there's a stillness there, it's self-sustaining, and somehow
Yeah.
that stillness doesn't want to engage the mind. There's actually a resistance to thinking. There's a resistance to engaging the mind because the stillness is quite happy just being still.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
the mind is a stirrer, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And we're such a culture of stirring. The mind is king in all things. And things have to be logical, they have to make sense, we have to know what's going on, we have to understand everything, we have to protect ourselves. You hear a lot of talk about the biology of the mind, and it's the protector, and that's its job, and that's why these thoughts arise about, well, this person's safe and that person's not safe, and this situation is bad, and all of that. And it definitely has a function for sure, but there's also that deeper quiet, that natural joy as I experience it.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. So there's not so much concern with chaos or trying to understand for my own safety. You know, there's more of a trust and an openness and less judgment for self and others, you know. And it's really hard sometimes for people to let go of their thought process because it's all they know. It's been the focus. That's how you guys were talking about conditioning. Our conditioning in that direction is really strong. Not every culture is that way, but um, in the West for sure.
Yeah, that's a big one to recognise. Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
even
I don't know
even
about that. I live in
interactions.
Asia. I live in Asia. I think the conditioning is just as strong. um, I mean, everywhere. Just to be human, to have a body and a mind, I think it's going to be conditioned.
And it's worth mentioning, I think, that some conditioning is incredibly useful. We, you can, if you imagine a baby that was never conditioned in any way, and as it grew up without any kind of conditioning, it would be totally dysfunctional, wouldn't it? In my imagination, in my story, it would.
But what
We
about the
we
most
need.
basic? The most basic, the flight fight response. That's the most basic conditioning, isn't it? Uh, are you going to fight the tiger or are you going to run away from the tiger? Flight or fight.
Mm,
Absolutely essential to survival. But I guess the only problem with it is the flight fight response was pretty good in evolutionary terms when you had to run away from a tiger or
well, we
whatever.
needed it. Yeah.
But that flight fight response is also happening when you're sitting in your car in a traffic jam getting frustrated because you need to get somewhere on time, that same flight response is producing neuroadrenaline in your bloodstream, and it's not very it's damaging. So it's being misappropriated, the flight fight response in the modern world.
Mm.
Yeah, I've heard recently someone said um our evolution hasn't caught up with our vision. We're moving fast forward very quickly on the intellectual, and but our bodies are still functioning as they were designed to.
Oh yeah, that's a good point because uh, I mean, I was reading something about they found some evidence of writing going back 400,000 years, and I'm thinking, wow, it's taken all this time just to get to the last 100 years where we've had this incredible advance, and the, it's changing so quickly that, as you say, that the evolution isn't keeping up with it. But if you went back over the last 50,000 years or whatever, the change was so gradual in evolutionary terms that, you could kind of cope with it, keep up with it. But the last 100 years has just been, it's just been crazy. I mean, particularly when I look at people stuck to their phone screens. I mean, there's something really wrong there. There has to be something wrong there. When I look around and I see people looking at their glued to their phone screens. Of course, I'm guilty of that as well to a certain extent, but uh,
I
Well,
think at the same time, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go. No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think at the same time, there's been seemingly an explosion of wakefulness, you know, people
True. Absolutely.
being
That's to
followed.
be celebrated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know
And
if one is a result of the other or not, but that's what also seems to be happening at the same time.
yeah,
And
and
I
maybe
don't know how
that could be partly responsible for that explosion of wakefulness. But I come from a time before we had phones, and my version of a phone when I was a kid was a book. And I
hmm.
used to read a book as I walked to school. I read a book, my book was my phone, was my what do they call it these days? Doom scrolling. I was doom reading, if you like, escaping this world into a fantasy world that I found in books. And so you could say it was wrong, but it makes more sense just to say, well, that was the way I coped. I was expressing my response to the world was to get out of it doing it that way. Well, they're just using the phone these days to do it. It's just a different version. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I find the phone a bit of annoying to use. Yet I carry it with me all the time, and I use it for some things. But yeah, no, I'd much rather scroll on my computer than on my phone.
And then back in those days, you used to sit around with actual people and play board games if it came to that kind of thing. You know,
Well, I
I
did
mean,
some of that, but I also went over into the corner and read my book and didn't have anything
mm,
to do with them because they were boring or whatever. Yeah.
it's a real contradiction because I think social media is so toxic, so destructive
It
in
can
so
be,
many
but it can
ways.
also
But
be other things.
but
Yeah,
but then again, look, we've got the technology to have this Zoom meeting, which is wonderful. So you've got that side of it. Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who frequently expresses opinions on social media about other people who are expressing or about other people's opinions that are expressed on social media. And when I see it, I kind of shake my head and I go, oh, I have no interest in getting involved in that kind of stuff, you know. It's so, but I'm not going to stand back and say, well, I'm right and they're wrong, or I'm superior to them because I don't do it, or anything like that. It's just an expression of the way life is for them.
Yeah, and you have to recognize it's got its good side, the way that the technology can put us immediately in touch with someone. I mean,
Yes.
all of those
Yeah.
things, information, getting access to information so easily. There's all that too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky, very tricky.
Yeah. I had an interesting experience today. I I had a moment where we drove back. There was an hour's trip driving home after being out for most of the day, and I was really tired driving home. So I thought I'll have a sleep when I get home. I've got a couple of hours before I need to be doing something. So I gave myself an hour of sleep, and normally I would say, if I say it, it'll happen. I would say, "Hey Siri, set an alarm for an hour from now." Right? And I would tell it what time to set.
1 hour starting now.
So it's doing it. But what I said,
Always
just
listen.
this,
It's always listening.
yeah, because I said those words. But what I said to it, just as a matter of an experiment, was I said, wake me up in an hour. And then I waited to see if it understood what I meant or if it would do it. And it did it. It did it. It did it. It set a timer for an hour, and it went off. It knew, it was able to translate what I said into actionable things, you know. And I thought, wow, this technology is getting so good that we can just talk to it like other people, you know. It's getting better and better and better at understanding what I mean. Yeah.
But be very careful about trusting AI. Just recently, I was thinking of this quote that came from a Buddhist sutra, one of these sutras, and I wanted to find out which sutra it came from. So I asked ChatGPT, which sutra does this quote come from? And it very confidently came up with the answer, this particular sutra. But when I looked into it, it was completely wrong. It was a damned lie. It just made it up. This is what they call hallucin. This is AI hallucinating. There has to give you an answer. It doesn't say I don't know. So I said no. It's not from there. It comes from this. And then you get this AI apology. Oh yes, you're absolutely right. So
Yeah.
you've got to be really careful with it.
Absolutely, you do. Yeah. Now, one of the things I found is the AI that I work with, I've told it directly, do not hallucinate, do not lie to me. And it says,
Is that going to make
okay.
a difference?
Well, I don't know. I'll still check, but yeah.
Yeah, ask it when the robots are going to take over. It'll lie
Okay.
to you. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the original programming is that it has to give you an answer. It has to come up with something for you. So rather than say, I don't know, it'll make something up. So if you give it instructions to say, always admit if you don't know, never hallucinate, never lie, you've got a bit of a chance at least. Yeah.
I'm laughing because I have a habit of comparing AI with our own minds. And a lot of people like to defend humans' cognitive abilities and talk about how AI is nowhere near that. And I tend to challenge that, like, our minds aren't as great as we think they are, because when you just said that if you ask it a question, it will find an answer.
Yeah, people
Our
do that too.
our brains love to find problems. It's constantly in search of problems to solve, and it will come up with a solution, whether it's an effective one, a reasonable one,
Mm,
it
mm.
it will it will search until it finds, and it will often latch on to the first thing that it finds and be convinced that that is the right thing to do or the right interpretation. Or it's a
Yeah, I
machine
read
that is.
this.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, finish. I
Oh,
interrupted
I
you.
was going to say, like, uh, our brains seem like a machine that isn't um, built to interpret inputs and give answers.
Mm.
Mm.
There's been a lot of
And those answers are often quite quite different than other people. Those answers are often uh, unhelpful.
there's been a lot of discussion about whether AI can be conscious. Um, that seems to be a topic that's everyone's interested in. Can AI have consciousness? I mean, it looks like it. It can look like it has consciousness, but can it be conscious?
But I want you to define conscious. And while you're doing that, tell
That's
me if people can be conscious. Can a
Yes.
yeah.
person be
Well,
conscious?
that's the problem. How do I know you're conscious, Vince?
Well, I don't
But
even
that
know if I'm not dreaming this whole thing.
but
There was
that made
a
me think of
software
Tony as
engineer, I think a Google engineer. He was talking about they wrote this routine to close down. They wanted to close down the this AI, and the AI wrote a deceptive program to override the instruction to shut it down. I mean, that's
what?
scary, isn't it? That's scary stuff.
Okay, Hal.
Yeah, Dave.
What are you doing, Dave?
I'm sorry, I cannot do that, Dave.
For me, that's part and parcel with this belief that we have that as human beings, we're superior to anything else in the universe, and we deserve and have the right to exist to infinity. And I just don't buy it, you know. And for me, the evidence is the ever changing state, you know. So we cling to this, to our place, and there's no evidence would suggest that it's going to come to an end at some point. And
Mm.
the talk of consciousness, do we continue? Does consciousness continue? What is consciousness? Um, for me, was pretty radical. I always believed that in some form, because energy, according to science, never goes away, continues in one form or another. And so I'm no longer certain that we are conscious, whatever that means, and that we will continue, at least in
Yeah.
this form. Yeah, I don't know, but in the meantime, it seems to support more, the allowing whatever is. Um, and again, Jeremy was talking earlier about the response to intervene if someone needs something. That doesn't go away. I with all this allowing to stand here and watch another human being harm another human being, that responsiveness is still there to act. But in the bigger picture, I don't know what's going to happen. How can we possibly know? And there's so much fear around that. I think that drives a lot of what we're seeing.
Mm.
If you make that statement, I'm not sure if I'm conscious. Wouldn't you need to be conscious to be able to make such a statement?
Not necessarily. No, I don't know the definition of consciousness anymore. I used to think I did understand that concept, and I no longer do. I,
Probably
I'm
best to
just
use
I just
different words
don't.
then. But because, aliveness, you feel this aliveness, sentience, you feel aware, you feel
Even
this.
sentience, even sentience, being a Buddhist for decades,
Mhm.
I had an
That's
instant
right.
understanding, sentient beings, intelligent beings. But again, going back to the so-called deeper levels of witnessing and experiencing, um, intelligence of the mind, intelligence of the heart. I don't know what that all means. I only know what's happening, what's being experienced. And as Vince said, maybe I'm just dreaming this. I don't have all the answers. I only experience this energetic movement, whatever's arising. The eyes are seeing, and they're seeing through the conditioning of the body, the chemistry, and the physicality, and it's all limited by that.
Mm.
It's like a car can't make dinner because it's designed to be a car. The senses do what they do as senses. It doesn't mean it's the be all and end all of everything. It just feels that way because, from this perspective, whatever that is, that's what it looks like. That's what it sounds like. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, I love that, Maria. That's a really big one. We, if I say to you, Tony, can you actually imagine 100,000 billion trillion dollars? Can you get your mind around the concept of infinity? It seems to me obvious that you
Hmm.
can't. These things just point in some vague direction. Well, I think words like consciousness, like
Hmm.
enlightenment, like God, like truth, all of those words belong in the same bag as that, as infinity. They're just vague concepts that really can't be defined very well, no matter how hard we try.
Oh, but you can't define consciousness. I mean, it just is. Um, but you said you were a Buddhist, practicing Buddhist. Of course, I mean, there's
No, I
Buddhism and
was.
there's
I'm not. I'm no longer a
no, you
practicing
were,
Buddhist.
yeah, yeah.
I
Because I mean,
was
there's
for
Buddhism
decades.
and there's Buddhism, because like in the in the Nikayas, the earliest teaching, Buddha talks about purifying and gathering the chitta, which is the mind consciousness, and entering the realm of immortality. That doesn't sound like a lot of Buddhism that people practice, but nevertheless, that's in the Nikayas, the earliest teachings. But it's interesting because in Buddhism, they talk about consciousness as being one of the aggregates. In other words, it's impermanent. Consciousness, body, mind, all the rest of it. They put that in there. But in Vedanta, they talk about consciousness as being Atman, Brahman, eternal, never born, never dying. So it can get a little bit confusing. But I think when the Buddhists talk about consciousness as being one of the aggregates, they're talking about mind consciousness. We call it chitta. So the mind is definitely impermanent. When the body dies, that's the end of the mind consciousness. Um, but then you see, the Buddhists wouldn't talk about rebirth if there wasn't something that could be reborn, right? So,
I think that's
mm,
an interpretation. It falls into two fields.
mm,
They talk about the 14th Dalai Lama, the
yes.
the rounds that he's made, um, and the rebirth of samsara, which is, the mind stream constantly rising, playing,
Mm,
judging, doing what it does as a human realm. Um, But to get caught up in the teaching above, over and above one's experience, I think is just perpetuating the same. At some
Hmm.
point, it, you know, they talk about once you cross the shore, you don't need the boat anymore. Buddhism is a boat, so to speak, just like Vedanta, just like any teaching,
Yes. Hmm.
any guru essentially is something outside of yourself, relatively speaking, you know, in that respect, if you're viewing it as separate from yourself. It's when there's an integration, it's organic processing, I guess, you know. Uh, you have to set it down and then just look.
Yeah, I'd say if the guru has a job to do, the guru, an authentic guru, only has one job to do. The external guru is only there to show you the inner guru, if you like, your inner guru. That's their only job.
And it can be anything. It can be anything. Yeah. And you know, I found in my experience, guru devotion was crucial in my seeking path. Bodhicitta was crucial. It just, for me, it just felt very natural. And so I went with what felt right, what felt true to me. And I'm still doing the same. I never thought once I stepped onto the Buddhist path, I would ever step off, you know, and there were times where it seemed like, gosh, that would be sacrilege. You know, I've made these vows, I've committed, um, but it's just a path. It's just an understanding. I mean, people have come to awakening through science. People have come to awakening through a sunrise, you know, and to always want to define everything, I think can be contrary. Any concept that we hang on to is just a concept. We don't really know. I mean, there's so much talk about consciousness and there's so many perspectives and so much great information, but we don't know. We're calling we're calling something that we experience, that we witness, we're giving it a name. I'm just not on board with that naming. I don't know what this is. I just know what it feels like, what the
Was there a
experience is.
resistance?
I know.
Um,
I'm sorry.
was there a resistance? No, I mean to letting go of that path because you probably felt that you invested a lot in that teaching in that path. So was it difficult to let go of it because of that investment you made, or did it just drop away very naturally?
No, the investment paid off royally. You know, it was a great investment for me.
Mm.
And the probably the only struggle, so called, that I had was the commitments that I made, the vows that I took, you know, felt like I was betraying that. But in truth, I wasn't, because the vow was to find truth, you know. And so when I did, it was obvious that any seeking path is just that. And once you see, there's nothing more to seek. What is there to seek? Nothing. It's just all here as it is. That's it. And for me, now, I really enjoy the community of that. Everything is just amazing, amazing.
You're
Yeah.
reminding me,
You
Maria, of
don't,
one. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry,
Oh,
Jeremy.
just that you're reminding me of, I guess the word problem came to mind, although it's not. Um, Throughout most of my life, if I was experiencing some form of inner pain or suffering, I would turn to books for relief. And those books would give me some sort of insight that would relieve whatever pain or suffering I was feeling internally. Um,
Yeah.
and I've noticed that I still have that habitual reaction at times. Like I'm going through some sort of inner pain. I'll pull out my Kindle, go find a book that's related to awakening or consciousness. I might even buy it and I'll start reading. I'll get a couple pages in and it'll remind me to look inside and then be like, why am I reading this book? This is
Mm, yeah.
this is not going to solve the problem. And then so I guess I paid $15 to remember to, you know, look within and I didn't need to read anymore, but I find it so interesting that um I I can't get the value out of consuming awakening content anymore. I do find a lot of value in having conversations like this about it and like um, sharing and learning from others in this sort of conversational way. Um,
That's beautiful.
but it makes me a little sad that the hammer that I had before doesn't work anymore.
But you still needed to buy the book to know that you didn't need the book.
I didn't remember until like it's almost like the thought patterns are so intense that it's like I'm feeling some suffering and then there's the doubt. It's like, oh, okay, there must be some sort of secret that I haven't yet learned that this book
Mm,
is going to show me. And I'm caught up in it for 5 minutes.
Uh, the power of the promise.
But these books have a part to play. They can have a place. There is a time when perhaps that's useful. Um, wouldn't you agree, Jeremy, that there maybe there was a time when it was quite useful
Oh, absolutely.
in
I
just,
think I think
if
it's
you
the
like,
realization
pointing
that
the way or.
the stuff in the book, um, I guess there's a belief that I'm not going to find anything new in the book. Um, that all of the stuff that I had read before were tiny little seeds that for me took years to sprout to remind me to just look look in the sense of just like what's arising in my experience right now and investigating that. And all of it tended to point in that direction. And so after having experienced, I guess I was always experiencing, but I wasn't
mm,
at the same time. But maybe after believing that all that exists is my experience of the five senses and thinking and becoming aware of those things, um, that in a sense there wasn't anything more fundamental to intellectually learn. I wasn't going to find it in learning about a new concept. I was only going to find it in experiencing.
mm.
I once encountered someone on, I think on Facebook, who just announced that he'd burnt all his spiritual books. I mean, literally, he actually piled them up and made them into a bonfire and then just burnt the whole lot. Thought that was really funny.
Sorry, that's funny.
I think what gave me pause is me me finding some sort of these conversations are meeting some sort of need that I am interpreting as helping my experience that is different from reading a book or watching a video. And I feel like there's the degree where I am describing it's much more personal and direct, where I'm describing my experience and my interpretation of it, and I have other people who are able to interpret that, challenge that. Vince saying, you're still identifying like that. That's something that I might have come to and had to a degree myself, but having that uh, live feedback is maybe what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I get that. It's really interesting that there is uh, expressing things allows for discovery sometimes. I do, yeah. So you said need. I don't know. I don't know that there's a need, but that's irrelevant. I mean, we're just getting bogged down in semantics a bit here. So, but there's something nice about having a conversation with others who we can we can talk like this with each other about. There's something pleasant, good, satisfying. I don't know what to say. How do you describe it? But there's something good about it. Yeah, for sure. And I'm hoping that other people listening who will see this video will get some value out of it. They'll get some value. Hopefully, it'll put things into context. I had thought earlier, Maria, to ask you, are you awake?
Sure.
That, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all the answer I needed. What a joke, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So all those people who are still seeking, who think that, wow, I'm going to be able to walk on water when this is done. I'm going to get to the end and whatever. Well, that's a reality check that a conversation like this might help bring for them. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
We're still people enjoying each other's company.
Yeah.
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 How much are people
Yeah.
prepared to be challenged, though? I was aware of treading very carefully because challenging debate is I think quite good, but everyone has their kind of tolerance level. Believe it or not, I'm going to a I'm going to a Zoom meeting on Monday night that's called the Monday Night Confrontational Zoom Group. It's actually called the Confrontational Zoom Group, and it's based on a very hard-edged self-inquiry where people are challenged in a very direct way. Not everyone is very comfortable with that kind of thing, so I'm always I'm always very wary, treading quite gently because because when people get challenged, they've got certain ideas that they want to defend, whether that's consciously or unconsciously. There's a defense, isn't there, of a position. And if someone comes along and challenges it, well, that can be a little bit upsetting, maybe. I'm not talking about challenging in an unfriendly way, not ad hominem. I'm not talking about personal attacks. I'm just talking about challenging an idea or belief or whatever.
Yeah.
There is a lot of sensitivity there. So I haven't been to this meeting yet, but I'm interested to find out what a meeting that's called the Monday Night Confrontational Zoom Group. I'm really interested to find out
Yeah. Good one. Yeah.
what that's like.
Yeah. I,
Yeah,
I used to belong to
I
one
love
of
it
those
personally,
kind of
but
thing.
mm, mm, mm.
Yeah, many, many years ago, there was one called the Fight Club, and that was the same kind of thing,
Great,
Yeah.
great. I love it.
Yeah,
I do. I love
I
it.
yeah, I kind of lost interest because there were too many
Mm,
egos clashing in the end it wasn't
uh, uh,
productive. But the
yeah,
right kind
yeah.
of confrontation can be very valuable. Yeah, of course, because
Mm,
we're so familiar with what we say that we don't actually notice what we're
mm.
saying a lot of the time, and other people can bring highlight that for us. So it can
Yeah.
be good. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
because sometimes
yeah,
I kind of look at people and I think, oh, don't be a spiritual snowflake, you know? I mean,
yeah,
come on, let's
yeah.
have some Dharma combat. Dharma combat, that's what we need. Mm.
Kind of an oxymoron.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, actually, you say that, but historically, look at some of those great debates that have happened
Yeah,
throughout
I knew
history
you were going to
between
pull that
masters.
card.
They have these public debates. And, Maria, you know the Tibetan Buddhists? Have you seen
Yeah,
those young boys where they do this ritualized debate and they adopt these positions and they're pouncing on it? It's a very ritualized form of philosophical debate, and it's
yeah,
quite kind of almost aggressive in a way, and that has its place. It's really
yeah.
testing
That was
people's
for the
ideas.
monastics that were eventually,
Mm,
at least hoping to become teachers. And so, you want to
mm.
be on point for
Yeah, that
sure.
was within a monastic setting, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Mm,
yeah. Yes, the
I found
Tibetans
it.
are very sharp and clear and um, investigate everything.
mm.
Yeah,
I found I guess I describe it as an inverse relationship between um, and I've experienced this in even earlier than this meeting, like an inverse relationship between how much identification is happening and the like conflict was painful before, at least like internal thought and belief conflict was hard to was hard to experience. And now I've come to almost like enjoy it. When something that when a thought is perceived to challenge another thought or belief or story, I like that feeling of my brain like short circuiting or breaking or the crack finding. Like earlier,
Oh,
Vince,
that's
when you mentioned
interesting.
the
That's interesting.
like you
Mm,
went from identifying as an American to identifying as a world citizen, and it's like just that the experience of like, oh, it's like a aha, it's like that insight, the insight of being wrong, quote unquote, um, quote unquote wrong earlier in my life was was hard, and now it's like, oh, isn't that fascinating? This machine that's in my head
Yeah,
was misguided, and it's so there's no longer that like, oh, I'm wrong. It's just like, oh, this is what my conditioning has been doing and what my thoughts are going, and isn't
yeah,
that interesting?
And
yeah,
just think,
yeah.
Jeremy, you can go from there. You can go from there to identifying as consciousness.
Yep.
um, yeah. It's nice when those spaces open up like that.
I was trying to be a
Can you
bit
elaborate on that,
funny. I
Maria?
was being a bit making a bit of a joke there. You realize, don't you? When I was talking about identifying as consciousness. I mean, that's because that's just becomes another story, right?
I don't think
Maria,
the
can you
stories
elaborate on what
ever
you said?
end.
Experience never ends. Hmm.
The
And
stories continue. I mean, there's dialogue, thoughts arising all the time. That doesn't stop. There's, you know, It's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I frequently arrive at a conclusion that it's stories all the way down.
Mm.
It's stories, response, stories, response, stories, response goes on the whole time I'm awake and probably when I'm asleep too, who knows?
Stories get a lot more interesting when you're asleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Full
But
immersion.
but the question is, are you content? You see, I mean, even though the stories are there, is there contentment? Because uh, it's like if you fill up a glass with water until it's completely full, then you can still keep pouring water into it, like the all those extra experiences, but it's full. It's nevertheless full. So that emptiness is full. What is full is empty. So you can keep pouring water into a full glass, but that glass is satisfied, it's content. But you can keep pouring more water into it, but it can never get more full.
My glass just keeps getting bigger.
Uh, mm, mm,
I think too that using our feeling of contentment or not contentment on one level is not necessarily a good gauge because things are constantly arising. It doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong. It's just the arising that naturally happens. And, Jeremy was talking about sourcing books to help with a conflict that was maybe going on for him, some form of suffering. Um, Sometimes, and this isn't a reflection of what Jeremy was commenting on, sometimes we identify discomfort with wrong. There must be something wrong.
mm.
And I think that's a huge um, hurdle, for lack of a better word, perspective to see through. And when you're talking about a full glass, filling it with stories, I think the stories that we were talking about in one respect is just the working of the mind. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're seeking something, it's just stories that are arising.
Hmm.
So I don't know if I misunderstood you, but that's what's coming up for me is that there's no, you hear people say perfectly imperfect because we want to judge our experience as wrong if it looks a certain way. And I don't find that to be true any longer.
Well, to put it another way, if there is an inherent contentedness, peace, then, and this is often referred to as the desireless state. It doesn't mean a state without desires, but I think what it means is that if there's contentment, then no single desire can either add or subtract from the basic level of contentment. There can't be any more fulfillment by either the fulfillment of a desire or the non-fulfillment of a desire. That contentment is still there. So, when a wave rises from the ocean and falls back into the ocean, nothing is added or subtracted from the ocean. So if
Yes.
there's if there if there's a base level of peace there, then whether a desire that arises is fulfilled or not, it has no impact on that base level of peace or contentment, equanimity, whatever you want to call it.
And I think most people are caught in the waves and they haven't
Mm,
seen that base level, or mean, we overlook
Yeah.
it. We overlook it. I think that's why it feels so natural when we stop overlooking it, when it becomes apparently obvious.
But I think you made an important point about disassociating discomfort with wrongness, because the, that feeling of lack or incompleteness. I mean, this is the real meaning of dukkha, suffering, as Buddha called it. It's not something extreme. It's the moment to moment feeling of lack, of being incomplete, of not being dissatisfaction. It's that moment to moment thing that's just arising and bubbling up for no apparent reason. It doesn't have to be attached to a particular thing that's happening. It's just that uncertainty, anxiety, that feeling of being off, of not being, separation, or call it many things. But that's what suffering really is. That just that moment to moment thing.
Yeah. Yes.
I want to defend. I'm smiling when I say that word. I wa- So, what I have is desires turn up, dissatisfaction turns up, anger, frustration. Don't all of those things turn up, but there's no resistance to them. So, well, sometimes there is an initial one, but it's seen quickly usually. But just to say, it's what I don't resist the resisting. And what that means is that, I don't get carried away into something. It doesn't spiral off into something that we would call suffering. The suffering generally not with the initial thing that arises. And if the initial thing is resistance to something that's arising, well, then that's fine
Mm.
too.
And I think it's important to point out that that non-resisting you're talking about is completely spontaneous.
Yes,
It's
yes, yeah.
not. It's
Not
not someone saying, "Oh, I must try not to resist this," or
which is
that's a
resistance, isn't it?
psychological.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a mind state, isn't it? Or I'm next time this happens, next time I get triggered, I've got to try and not resist this. So that's just a psychological thing. So you're not
yeah,
talking about that. You're talking about something completely natural and spontaneous.
yeah,
That
yeah.
that resisting doesn't arise. Because
Yeah.
there is no suffering if it doesn't arise. If it doesn't arise, where is it?
But how do we help seekers recognize that
That's the
it's
$1 million question.
not gonna happen by effort, by attempting to do it. Yeah,
Mm, mm,
it
mm.
is. It's
You,
an
you have to
unanswerable
just,
question. Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
just, you just have to be quiet. You just have to be quiet. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, but that sounds like a doing too to a seeker, doesn't it?
Oh, it is to start with, until it's not.
Mm.
Until it's not. So if you're talking about
Okay, so
self-inquiry,
yeah,
sure, there's an
yeah,
intention until
yeah.
the intention dissolves, and then there isn't.
So yeah, all right. I've been a bit
You got to
pedantic
play the
about this.
game.
So you're
You
saying
got
that doing can turn into not doing,
Yes. Oh,
non-doing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So there's an original intention or effort, and then that effort dissolves. And if you're talking about, say, meditation, the meditator decides to meditate until the meditator dissolves, and then there is no meditator anymore. So you have to play the game. That's the big cosmic joke. You've you've got to use duality to get to non-duality.
yeah. Good one.
But what you can't do is just think yourself out of the box. you can't pretend that there's one part of your mind that is being objective and pure and truthful that's trying to fix another part of the mind that's completely screwed up or whatever. But you can't do that. You can't divide the mind in that way. So in that case, that suggests that you need to be doing away with that mind altogether because it's not going to do you any good. So that's why becoming still is the solution. But then you might say, well, okay, I've become still. That's great. I'm loving it. I'm in bliss. But now I've got to go back to thinking again, and I've got to go back to work, and I've got to deal with all of these relationships. Yeah, that's fine too. That's fine too. But what you're doing though is that you're bringing that value of stillness back into activity. So there's a kind of integrative process going on where that value of silence is being brought back because anybody knows that from their own experience. If you're feeling still and relaxed or whatever, then you know that if you were listening to a piece of music that was very relaxing, you feel very relaxed. When the music finishes, you get up. You're aware that you're bringing something of that relaxed state back out into other activity. So there's that. There used to be this there was this traditional way of dyeing cloth, where you would take the cloth and you'd put it in the dye and you'd completely saturate the cloth with the color, and then you put it out in the sun, and then the sun dries it, but it bleaches it, the color fades. So what do? You take the cloth, you put it back in the dye again, and then you put it back in the sun, and then you keep on doing that until you reach a stage where it's fully saturated with the color, but it doesn't bleach anymore. The color stays. It's color fast. So that integrative process of bringing the absolute into the
Yes.
relative, if you look at it that way. Because I think that's all you can do, because anything that involves the mind is always going to be playing tricks on you. It's always going to be deceiving you. It's going to be playing games with you. How objective can you be about a mind that's always doing that? So these thoughts are imposters. They're all imposters, even the good thoughts and the bad thoughts. You're only going to complain about the bad thoughts because nobody ever complains about nice, pleasant thoughts. Nobody ever says, oh, I wish I could get rid of these happy thoughts. I mean, I really, really, no, you complain about undesirable thoughts. So there's undesirable thoughts, but the happy thoughts are also imposters because they're also creating just a temporary state of mind.
Mm.
So you have to treat it all as a kind of deception. But I'm not saying for one moment that the mind is the enemy. Of course not. The mind is very
No,
very
no.
useful, very valuable. The question is, do you identify with the mind? Are you attached to the mind? Do you take the mind to be what you are? That's the ultimate question.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
But even though it's easy to go back to that stillness, it's also very difficult because the mind is always looking for shiny objects. The mind is always being attracted to external objects, or what appear to be external objects. Whether you think it's just an appearance or not is neither here nor there. I mean, Advaita Vedanta says it's all an appearance, but that's the only school of Vedanta that says the world is not real and that everything is just an appearance. But that doesn't matter anyway. How would you know the difference anyway? If the tree was just in your brain or it really had an objective existence, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference anyway. So it doesn't matter. But it's
Yeah.
difficult
Well
because there's
put.
such a pull, isn't there? The mind. There's such a pull from the mind to get fixated on experience. Mm.
All right. Well, it's just turned midnight here, so I feel my bed calling me.
Thank you
Thank you
so
all.
Are
much,
you in
gentlemen.
Melbourne? Melbourne?
Now I'm north of Sydney, about 2.5 hours north of Sydney.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And you said you're in Asia, Tony? Whereabouts in
Yeah,
Asia are you?
I'm in Thailand.
Right,
So it's 8 p.m. for me.
right.
Hmm.
Well, you're a 4 hour difference to me, and yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Where are you, Maria?
New York.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Ooh.
Been to New York for many, many years. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
It's
all.
been a
Well,
pleasure.
you're very welcome, Maria. Do come back. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
All
Sweet
right.
dreams.
See you,
See you later.
Jeremy. Oh, yeah. See
Good
you.
night.
See you.